Alright, before we get into this video, I just want to thank you guys so much for 8,000 subscribers. I thought we'd celebrate with another Q&A because you guys seem to love the Q&As. I want to apologize for not uploading yesterday. I had some issues I had to sort out, but we're back. So let's enjoy the Q&A, and if you want your question answered in the next Q&A, remember to leave a comment with hashtag Q&A. Starting off with, would you like to see a fighting game with horror movie characters like Jason, Freddy, and Michael Myers made by NetherRealm? I've seen this idea thrown around quite a lot. I'm actually not sure where the theory started, but it would be very interesting. But one of the big problems that they would probably run into is roster size. Despite horror movies being a pretty big tradition, I'm not sure there is enough characters that you could really actually put on a roster. How do you actually get the rights for every single one of those characters? Obviously, NetherRealm was in a very advantageous position. They happen to be owned by Warner Brothers, so they happen to be able to get characters like Jason, Freddy, Alien, all that stuff. But when you start branching off and you need to make up more characters on the roster, you realize, wait a minute, Warner Brothers doesn't actually own every single horror movie character ever made. So I'm not sure how practical the idea is, but if it's something they wanted to do as a side project, they could release it as like a, not on the level of Injustice or Mortal Kombat, but some type of free-to-play PC title with like less characters on the roster than you would expect out of a regular fighting game. That's something that they could probably pull off, but I think like a full-on AAA title, massive budget like Injustice or Mortal Kombat, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And I'm not even sure I would want it to happen, to be completely honest. I would prefer them to spend time on creating games like Injustice and Mortal Kombat, games that I'm already invested in. Do you think Premier Skins should get gear? Well, the wording there is a little bit much, right? Do I think they should get gear? Probably not. The reason I say that is because it would be really awesome if we got gear. In fact, I used to think that we were going to get gear because of the difference in the concept art that they showed on the box for the pre-order for Reverse Flash and what he ended up looking like were very, very, very different. So when we first saw him in the trailer, I thought that it was an example of gear. But then later on, they deconfirmed that. At first, I was a little bit upset about that, but when you put a little bit more thought into it, you realize that it's probably a good thing they didn't put gear on the Premier Skins, because whatever goes into a game, that costs them something. They need to put time and effort into creating that thing. So if they commit to having Premier Skins have gear, which takes up a lot of development time, you won't be able to create as many Premier Skins. The Bizarro Premier Skin might not have ever happened because they spent so much time making gear for Reverse Flash. So whilst it would be very awesome, I don't think it's very practical. If you could choose a villain for Injustice 3, who would it be? It cannot be a playable character from Injustice 1 or Injustice 2. Wow, that's a really good question. I haven't actually put a whole lot of thought into this, but if we go down my dream/theory video I had about Injustice 3, I think a really good villain would be Vandal Savage. Vandal Savage and like a group of other villains, maybe. Kind of like a Legion of Doom. That would be very cool, actually. Yeah, Legion of Doom. What do you think of a possibility of a other Bizarro League Premier Skin since we got Bizarro? So if I understand the question correctly, I think you're asking me, do I think we will get more Premier Skins in the same league as the Bizarro Premier Skin? So changing visual effects. I certainly hope we do, and it seems that that's a precedent they want to set, because this is the first one being released after the launch of the game, and it's significantly higher quality than, say, Vixen and Mr. Freeze. I think a really good Premier Skin to add to the game that would be a perfect example of these visual effect changes would be Heatwave for Captain Cold, because almost everything Captain Cold can do, Heatwave theoretically could do with different types of fire effects. We've already seen the fire effect from Bizarro act like a freeze. The only extra step would have to be the big ice block that Captain Cold drops on the floor, but that could easily just be kind of like a molten rock thing. But there are so many other good options. Favorite season of Arrow and The Flash? Oh my god, I love this question so much. I'm sorry for all the people who don't like the CW shows. I love them. I think The Flash season 1 is probably one of the best Flash seasons, but it's really close. I like season 2 and 3. Arrow, however, I used to say season 3, but since season 5 finished, I'm a huge fan of the ending of season 5, and it makes the rest of the season look so much better because you understand the motivations of the villain. I think season 5 might be my favorite season of all of the CW shows. Season 5 of Arrow, to be specific. Do you think Firefly could be a Firestorm Premier Skin? Sort of. Possibly. Maybe. The problem is, you need to justify why the flight would look so weird. Firestorm kind of just hovers there. That's not really what Firefly does, so I'm not sure it makes a ton of sense. I think the amount of finagling, is that even a word? I'm gonna pretend it's a word. The amount of effort you would have to go through in order to justify why Firefly is moving in the same way that Firestorm does, because keep in mind, they can't change the animations, they can change the effects, But if they change any of the animations, hitboxes are different and things like that, and they seem to be very against changing any of that, probably for good reason. So I certainly wouldn't expect this, but I mean, it's possible. What would you want to have instead of directional inputs? There really is nothing else. For Injustice 2, I wouldn't want anything different. For a game to be built without directional inputs, it needs to be built from the ground up. So Rising Thunder is a very good example of this. You can do some research on that if you're actually interested. They built that game from the ground up, knowing that they weren't going to have directional inputs because the game was going to be on PC as their primary platform, and they wanted people to be able to play on keyboard, and directional inputs don't really translate onto a keyboard. So instead of having directional inputs, they limited every character to have 3 abilities, and they gave them cooldowns, and just you press one button and then the ability comes out. You could do this on a controller as well because the game was playable on a controller. Right now in fighting games, you either use the D-pad or you use the thumbstick. Most people use the D-pad. Assuming you're using the D-pad, or even this applies to the thumbsticks as well, you have either 2 thumbsticks or a thumbstick and a D-pad that isn't being used there. You could bind them to do abilities. There are plenty of different ways you could map out controllers in order to implement something different than directional inputs, but you need to design the game knowing that. Injustice 2 hasn't done that, of course, because it's a game with directional inputs, so there are abilities like command grabs that are significantly stronger than the rest of your other abilities, but are significantly more difficult to execute. The way you could do something like this and have them remain to be as strong as they are is they could do self-damage, the frame data could be different. There's plenty of different ways to balance around it if there were just one-button abilities, but it wouldn't work in Injustice 2 as it is right now. But I certainly hope that the industry does move in a direction that we start designing games from the ground up, knowing that directional inputs won't be in the game, because that way we can get more people playing fighting games, and that should be our end goal because we want a more healthy community. The problem is the barrier to entry. A fighting game isn't necessarily more difficult than any other game. The problem is actually getting to the point where you're really playing the game. Anyone can pick up a controller and shoot somebody in Overwatch. Nobody can pick up a controller and immediately throw a fireball in a fighting game, let alone do an entire combo. The combo should be the hard part, not the throw a fireball. Do you think there will be more abilities added to the game? I actually hadn't put a lot of thought into this. We do know that they will be adding more gear to the game. That has been 100% confirmed, but I never really thought about them adding abilities, but they have recently confirmed that more shaders will be coming to the game. So if we're going to get more gear, we're going to get more shaders. It just seems plausible to me that we'll also get more abilities. So be on the lookout for that. I certainly think that will happen. But I'm glad you did bring that to my attention because I hadn't put any thought into it before. Would Arrowverse Huntress be a good premiere skin for Red Hood? Switch the guns with crossbows. Well, that's an interesting one. They did actually want Huntress in the game fairly early on. If you haven't seen, there are early screenshots of Injustice 2 and they had like grayed out characters who weren't finished yet, and one of them was Huntress, but they decided to cut her for whatever reason. I think if Huntress was to show up as a premiere skin, first of all, I don't think it would show up as Red Hood because they have confirmed they don't want to have female to male premiere skins or vice versa. But even assuming they were able to do that, first of all, it's a little bit of a stretch to have Huntress be a premiere skin for Red Arrow just because of how quickly bullets fly across the screen in comparison to how quickly arrows would have to fly across the screen. Obviously, arrows are significantly slower than bullets. Bullets are very, very fast, so the animation would look a little bit weird. Also, even if you were able to somehow pull all of that off, I don't think they would use Arrowverse Huntress as a premiere skin for Red Hood. They would probably just use Huntress. But that doesn't mean we won't get Arrowverse Huntress. They might even end up doing Huntress for DLC because she was one of the early considered characters, and then they could, in the future, when they do some type of Arrowverse premiere skin pack or whatever, maybe they could add Huntress. But now we've gone so far removed from the original question that I probably could have just said no and moved on. Do you think Deathstroke could work as a Red Hood premiere skin because of the trait, and his throwing stars could be throwing knives? P.S. Love your content. I'm not sure why we would go ahead and have Deathstroke be a Red Hood premiere skin instead of a Deadshot premiere skin. It's not like he'll be able to incorporate the sword with Red Hood or with Deadshot. So knowing that, I would probably just have him be a Deadshot premiere skin, but he could work as a Red Hood premiere skin as well. I don't know. And honestly, at this point, there are a lot of really upset Deathstroke fans that are, upset that he wasn't in the game, and who would probably be upset if he ended up being in the game through a premiere skin. So honestly, if there are this many upset fans about Deathstroke, I probably wouldn't even add him to the game at this point because people are going to be upset about it no matter how you do it. He can't have a sword unless he's a Robin premiere skin, and he can't throw batarangs because it just looks weird. I don't really have a solution for the Deathstroke thing at all. I would like him to be a Deathstroke premier skin because I want him to be in the game, and I don't care if he has his sword or not. I just want Deathstroke. Slade Wilson is Slade Wilson to me, not somebody with a sword. What do you think about the Clayface premier skin for Swamp Thing? I feel like Ballascarlo's shape-shifting abilities could mimic all of Alec Holland's in the game. I absolutely 100% agree with you. I believe I've answered this question before, but I said no, and the reason I said no is because we hadn't had the Bizarro premier skin, and I couldn't imagine Clayface creating all the flowers that Swamp Thing does with his trait. But Bizarro is such a big step away from what Superman does that you could totally just change those effects for Clayface, and they could instead be like lumps of, you know, clay, and it would work perfect. I certainly hope that this happens because it would give me an excuse to play Swamp Thing again, and I'm not a huge fan of his current kit, and it would give me an excuse to go play that character because Clayface is such a cool dude, and it would be very interesting to see his interactions with some of the other characters. Yeah, a big thumbs up. I certainly hope this happens, but it seems like a lot of development time for a character that isn't getting played right now, so maybe in a future patch where they buff him up a little bit because right now he's just not very strong. Do you think we'll get any more movie gear loadouts like with Wonder Woman, for example, Justice League Flash, or Batman vs Superman Batman? Absolutely, 100%, without a doubt in my mind. We've got Justice League coming in November. Justice League is going to be a very popular movie, and it's looking like it's going to be a very, very good movie as well. There are a lot of really cool costumes in there, and the Wonder Woman event for them was very successful, and it seems very likely to me that they'll end up doing it again with Batman vs Superman. Oh, sorry, not Batman vs Superman, with Justice League. And they already have a Batman vs Superman version of Superman in the mobile app, so all the pieces just seem to come together, and it looks like that we will be getting more movie premiere skins, or not premiere skins, but more movie gear loadouts moving forward, and I'm certainly excited about that. Which character do you think has the best gear? I think this question is really interesting because I think the answer for each individual is going to be vastly different depending on what character they play. Generally, the character you play the most, you'll end up having the best gear for, just because you've had more gear, so you've had a higher chance to see better gear for. Does that make any sense? If I never play Captain Cold, I'm never gonna see his awesome gear pieces because I'm never unlocking them, or at least I'm unlocking them very infrequently. So that being said, I really like Batman's gear because I play a lot of Batman, and Batman's awesome. Batman's the best character. No character is better than Batman. Batman's #1. Batman's awesome. Alright, final question. Do you think Ra's al Ghul could be a premier skin for Robin, swapping the Batarangs for shurikens? Oh my god, this is such a fantastic idea. I saw this idea a while ago, having Ra's al Ghul switch out for Robin, and at the time I didn't put a whole lot of thought into it just because of how different the two characters are. But since we've seen so many premier skins and how different, you know, a character like Vixen compared to Cheetah is, but they made the premier skin work, I think they could totally make Ra's al Ghul work as a premier skin for Robin, especially with that really cool idea of changing out the Batarangs for shurikens, which would work perfectly. And honestly, the only real stretch of the imagination you would have to do is the explosive shuriken or the explosive Batarang that Robin has, because that's very, very tech-based, and I couldn't really see Ra's al Ghul doing that, because most of his weapons are very, like, old-school ninja-style weapons, and I don't think he would have explosives on his shurikens. But I think that's a pretty easy thing to overlook when the rest of the premier skin would work perfectly. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. My name has been Bilbzy, and I will see you in tomorrow's video.
Holy mackerel.